Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're heading into ancient Egypt.
Always a fascinating place to explore.
It really is. We'll be looking at some classic Egyptian tales as retold by Roger Lancelin Green.
Ah, yes, great collection.
Yeah, it's got history, mythology, adventure. It really pulls you in.
You really get a sense of their world.
Ready to uncover some secrets of ancient Egypt.
Let's dive in.
It's like, I don't know, setting sail down the Nile on a quest for knowledge.
A fitting image. These stories really offer a window into how the Egyptians saw everything. Their gods, the afterlife, even daily life.
I'm really struck by their idea about the power of names. You know, like how Ra, the sun god, speaks the world into being.
It's a powerful concept, right? For them, a name wasn't just a label, it was a force. It could actually shape reality.
Wow, that's amazing.
It makes you think about the significance of storytelling in their culture, too. And hieroglyphs, they weren't just pretty pictures.
Right. Each one had meaning, maybe even magical power.
Exactly. The spoken word, the written word, it was all intertwined with this belief. It really permeates so many of their myths.
And speaking of powerful names, there's a story of Isis tricking Ra into revealing his secret name.
Oh, yes, she was clever.
So cunning. And that's what ultimately helps her husband, Osiris, become pharaoh.
She's such a compelling figure, Isis. Devoted to her family, but also driven, you know?
Ambitious.
Right. And that makes her story all the more interesting because you see how women in Egyptian society weren't easily categorized.
They had these complex roles. It wasn't simple.
Exactly.
Then you've got, oh man, the ultimate family drama. Osiris, his brother Set, their son Horus. Talk about a power struggle.
And that's a story that goes beyond just sibling rivalry.
Yeah, what's the deeper meaning there?
Well, for the Egyptians, this tale was an allegory for the entire cosmos. Osiris, he represents order.
Okay, I'm seeing it.
Set, he's chaos. And Horus, well, he's the hope for justice, for balance restored. And this cycle, death and rebirth, it's woven into everything. Their mythology, their burial rituals, everything.
So these stories weren't just entertainment then?
Not at all. They helped the Egyptians make sense of their world, their place in the universe, everything.
It's like a framework for understanding life itself.
You could say that.
And speaking of life, we can't forget the Nile River.
Absolutely crucial. Their whole civilization was built around it.
Right. I mean, it was the lifeblood of Egypt.
Their source of water, fertile soil.
But also potential for disaster, right? If the floods were too high or too low.
They lived with this constant dependence and anxiety when it came to the Nile.
It's so clear in that story of Zoser and the 7 lean years. When the Nile doesn't flood, famine strikes, and Zoser has to turn to his advisor, Imhotep, for help.
And Imhotep's solution, it's not just practical, it's completely tied up in their religious beliefs.
Because the pharaoh wasn't just a political leader.
He was seen as divine, responsible for maintaining this cosmic balance, not just societal order.
No pressure there.
So, Imhotep, he figures out where the Nile comes from mythologically. This island, Elephantine, where the god Nimu controls the river.
Okay, so to appease Kimu.
Zoser builds this magnificent temple and, get this, the first Nilometer.
Wow, so they could actually measure the river, try to predict the harvests?
Their practical needs, their religious beliefs, it's all intertwined.
Totally. And this whole idea of maintaining cosmic balance, it really ties into their fascination with power. Human power, divine power, all of it.
That's a great point. Think about the stories of the Sphinx and Hatshepsut.
Yes.
Prince Thutmose restoring the Sphinx, being rewarded with the throne.
That's ambition meeting divine intervention.
Right. And then you have Hatshepsut becoming pharaoh, even though she was a woman, claiming her right was divinely ordained.
Both stories make you think, right, about the relationship between humans and the gods.
For sure. Was the Sphinx manipulating Thutmose? Were the Egyptians truly subservient to the gods, or did they see it as more of a partnership?
It's like those stories give us this glimpse, but they also hint at the risks of seeking power, especially through magic.
Oh, absolutely. It's like they understood that power comes with a responsibility.
A heavy one sometimes.
Yeah.
Which brings us to, I think, a darker tale. Setna and the Book of Thoth.
Ah, yes, the allure of forbidden knowledge. A classic theme.
Setna, son of Ramses the Great, he's just obsessed with this legendary book, said to hold all the secrets of magic.
And he finds it eventually, but at a terrible price.
Didn't the previous owner, Neferkepta, and his whole family die horribly because they read it?
A cautionary tale for sure.
Yeah.
Don't mess with forces beyond your understanding.
It makes you wonder, though, was the knowledge itself dangerous?
Or was it how it was used?
Right. It's a warning, I think, about unchecked ambition.
And the importance of respecting boundaries even in the pursuit of knowledge. Some things maybe we're not meant to know.
Or at least not ready for.
And that theme, it resonates even today, Think about how we grapple with new technologies, scientific breakthroughs.
That's true.
Wisdom and responsibility, those have to be part of the equation too.
These ancient stories, they feel so relevant because they touch on these fundamental parts of human nature.
The desire for knowledge, the choices we make, the consequences, these are timeless questions.
Well, before we go any deeper into those questions, maybe we should turn our attention to something that fascinated the Egyptians more than anything else.
The afterlife.
The afterlife. It's almost like the afterlife was, I don't know, more important to them than this life. All these elaborate rituals, beliefs.
You could say that. Death wasn't the end. It was a transition to another realm with its own challenges, rewards.
I'm so fascinated by how they envisioned it. I mean, their tombs, those pyramids, they're incredible.
Yeah.
Such complex structures.
Oh, absolutely. And they weren't just burial places. They were designed as gateways to eternity, meant to help the deceased on their journey, make sure they transition successfully to the afterlife.
And the journey itself, what did they believe happened to a soul?
Well, there's a story that captures their vision really well. It's the tale of Setna's son, Osiris.
Setna, wait, the guy with the Book of Thoth? His son gets to explore the afterlife.
He does. Setna wants to know, basically, who has it better in the afterlife, a rich noble or a poor worker. So Osiris, using his magical powers, takes his father on a tour of the Duat, the underworld.
A VIP tour of the underworld? Wow. What's it like?
Just imagine, they witness the solar bark of Ra carrying the souls of the recently deceased.
The solar bark.
Right, that giant boat carrying Ra across the sky. It represented that cycle of life, death, rebirth. And seeing it descend into the west each night, that was crucial for the soul's transition.
Intense.
They passed through these guarded portals, challenges at every turn, punishments for the wicked.
Like a cosmic obstacle course with the highest stakes imaginable.
Exactly. And the climax is the judgment hall of Osiris, where hearts are weighed against the feather of truth. Anubis overseeing the scales, Thoth recording the results.
So no pressure then?
Not at all. Those deemed pure, they're led by Horus to Osiris himself. Granted eternal life in the fields of peace.
Sounds blissful.
A paradise mirroring all the joys of earthly life.
But what about those who fail the test?
They're devoured by this terrifying creature, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus. A pretty stark reminder of the consequences of a bad life.
Yikes. No wonder the Egyptians were so focused on morality, living right, and filling their tombs with provisions, spells, trying to prepare for every challenge.
It all makes sense when you understand their beliefs about the duat.
It really does. It makes me think about those who had unexpected journeys in this life, though. Imagine being, I don't know, shipwrecked on some strange island.
You're thinking of the shipwrecked sailor.
Yes. Stranded, and then encounters a giant serpent. Talk about an adventure.
It's a fascinating story. You get details about seafaring, their understanding of the world beyond Egypt, and their belief in these supernatural beings.
That Serpent King is a trip, though.
He's portrayed as wise, even benevolent, gives the sailor gifts, helps him return to Egypt.
It's like, even in creatures we might fear, they saw the divine.
Right. He's a protector, in a way, a symbol of those forces that can be both dangerous and helpful.
It makes you question what a monster really is.
And speaking of complex journeys, there's Sinuhe. His tale is like a political thriller.
I love that story. Exile, redemption. He overhears a plot against the pharaoh, has to flee, travels all over.
It really showcases how connected those ancient cultures were.
He ends up in retinue, right? Builds a new life, even has to duel a champion to prove himself.
His story is so relatable even now. Feeling caught between two worlds, longing for home. Have you ever felt that pull, listener, between different parts of your own identity?
It's so universal, that feeling.
Yeah.
But eventually, Sinuhe gets to go back to Egypt. Pardoned by the new pharaoh, given a lavish burial.
They believed a proper send-off was essential.
It shows that even when we feel lost, far from home, there's always that possibility of return.
Hope and resilience, those are powerful themes.
But not all journeys are epic adventures. Some are just about everyday struggles, especially when you're dealing with a rigid social hierarchy, like in ancient Egypt.
You're thinking of the stories that show us the more human side of their society, the challenges people faced.
Exactly. Let's see what those everyday lives were really like. So we've talked about creation myths, the gods, the afterlife. But what about just regular people in ancient Egypt? Did they have stories about their own lives?
Oh, absolutely. Not every tale is about pharaohs and magic. Some stories give us a glimpse into everyday life, like the peasant and the workman, for
It
example.
isn't in the workman. Okay, what's that one about?
It really shows the difference between those in power and the common people. There's this peasant, Sekti, trying to sell his goods in the city,
Okay.
and he runs into this awful overseer, Hemti, a real nasty piece of work.
I'm sensing a corrupt official here.
You got it. Hemti's greedy, thinks he's better than everyone else. He actually tricks Sekti, steals his donkeys and all the stuff he's carrying.
No way. That's terrible.
It really shows how power can be abused, especially in those hierarchical societies. Sadly, it probably wasn't that uncommon.
So what happens to Sekti? Does he just give up?
Not Seki, he's persistent. He refuses to be silenced.
Good for him.
He takes his complaint all the way to the top, the high steward of Pharaoh, and he gives these amazing speeches explaining the injustice he suffered.
He takes it to court, basically.
In a way, yes. They had systems for resolving disputes. And Sekti, he's eloquent. He's a good storyteller.
I guess that's what it took back then.
He speaks for 9 days straight.
9 days. Wow.
And eventually, it works. Even Pharaoh hears about it. He's so impressed with Sekti's speeches, he rewards him. Gives him Hemti's old job and all his wealth.
Talk about poetic justice.
Right. Even in a rigid system, truth and perseverance can win out, especially when you can tell a good story. Which reminds me of another tale, where cleverness saves the day.
Oh, which one?
The Taking of Joppa. It's about military strategy deception.
That's one with Thudi, right? The general who has to capture this heavily fortified city.
Exactly. A direct attack would be disastrous. So he comes up with this plan. It's like the Trojan horse, almost.
He tricks them.
He pretends to defect, sends a peace offering of baskets filled with gold.
Like-
Inside the baskets, his soldiers.
So smart.
It shows how strategic they were. Sometimes you win by outsmarting your opponent, not just brute force.
These stories about everyday Egyptians, they're amazing. They were just as clever and resourceful as the pharaohs and gods.
They faced their own challenges, fought for justice, and used their intelligence to overcome obstacles.
It's like no matter who you were in ancient Egypt, there was a story for you.
That's a great way to put it. Their tales, both grand and humble, they all reflect this deep human experience. And they show us a culture that valued wisdom, courage, justice, and the power of a well-told story.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into ancient Egypt, I can't help but think about how much these stories still resonate with us. Thousands of years later, we're still captivated by them.
It's a testament to the enduring power of storytelling, right? To teach, to entertain, to connect us across time and cultures.
It makes you wonder, what will people say about our stories thousands of years from now? What will they learn about us?
That's a great question to ponder. Maybe it's up to us to make sure our stories are worth telling. Stories that reflect our values, our struggles, our hopes.
Stories that inspire, that challenge, that remind us of what it means to be human.
Well said.
So, listener, as you go about your day, think about those ancient Egyptian tales. Which one stuck with you? What did you learn? And what stories are you going to tell?